In the dim, suffocating hush of a room lit only by a dying wall lamp, Fan Xiao sat alone with the kind of silence that could crush a man from the inside out. The cold liquor burned down his throat, but even that fierce sting couldn't drown out the thoughts clawing at his mind. At his feet lay a dozen broken matchsticks, snapped, splintered, and scattered like the remains of his last thread of patience. He wasn't drinking to numb himself. He was drinking because he couldn't afford to think clearly. Not tonight. Xiao yanked the bottle out of his hand, exasperation spilling from him like smoke. He complained as if he were talking to a misbehaving child, not a man famous for his ruthlessness. But even Xiao, for all his boldness, felt a flicker of fear under Fan Xiao's silence. When Fan Xiao didn't respond, when he didn't even blink, that fear sharpened. Lihicked lightly, foolishly, about heartbreak, about flings, about moving on. But the moment the word misery slipped out, Fan Xiao lifted his head, and his eyes, dark and sharp as fractured obsidian, made the air itself freeze. Only the glass on the table dared to make a sound, its crystal surface catching the faint light before sinking back into darkness. Fan Xiao touched his watch not out of habit but as if grounding himself, and said something that chilled even Xiao. That he could tolerate many things, but being abandoned was not one of them. He didn't love simply. He didn't hurt simply. And he certainly didn't lose simply. The decision he made next was ice disguised as fire. He would coax You Shulang back, gently, softly, carefully. And once Shulang believed in him again, once he returned, once he came willingly, Fan Xiao would be the one to walk away. It wasn't love speaking. It was wounded pride. It was a lion refusing to accept that his prey had slipped from his grasp. But even as he spoke like a man plotting revenge, there was a strange fragility pulling at the edges of his voice. A quiet panic he never admitted to himself. The next morning, reality proved colder than any liquor. You Shulang had changed the passcode, removed Fan Xiao's fingerprint access, locked him out for 3 days straight. But today, Fan Xiao came early. Early enough to catch him. When he intercepted You Shulang at the door, he spoke with a steadiness that felt wrong on him. Too controlled. Too deliberate. A fire wrapped in paper. He claimed innocence in the incident that had shattered everything between them. He said he never would have protected Shulang afterward if he'd had any part in the setup. And for the first time in days, You Shulang turned to truly look at him. What he said cut deeper than any blade. He wasn't angry that Fan Xiao had defended him. He was angry that the person who had the video, the humiliating, degrading footage, was Fan Xiao. Angry that Fan Xiao replayed it. Angry that he couldn't tell whether the man he loved had protected him, or mocked him, had comforted him, or savored the sight of him broken. Fan Xiao's breath halted. He didn't deny replaying the video. He admitted it. Openly. But he admitted it with a confession he had never dared to say aloud. He replayed it because he couldn't stop looking at Shulang. Because he was drawn to him. Obsessed with him. He begged not with grand words, but with exhaustion and raw sincerity, for Shulang to judge him fairly, not from fear. For a moment, the world stilled. You Shulang, weary to the bone, asked for space. Time to breathe. Time to sort through everything. Time to decide whether trust was still something they could salvage. But Fan Xiao, who had spent his entire life taking what he wanted by force or strategy, couldn't accept uncertainty. Couldn't accept waiting. His desperation leaked through the cracks, tightening like a wire around his ribs. He asked no, demanded to know what would happen if Shulang couldn't sort out his thoughts. Still, You Shulang didn't want to be cruel. He told him gently to go home and rest, to drink less, to stop destroying himself. And then he turned away. The door began to close. And that was the moment everything snapped. Fan Xiao shoved his hand through the shrinking gap, and the door crushed down on it hard enough to swell the skin instantly. You Shulang, startled, furious, yanked the door open only for Fan Xiao to push past him, storming inside with the force of a man cornered by his own fear. Before Shulang could react, Fan Xiao wrapped him in a brutal, Crushing embrace, an embrace so tight it bordered on desperate restraint rather than affection. A plea disguised as force. A demand disguised as strength. But when Shulang tried to tend to his injury, when he reached out the way only he ever did softly, carefully, Fan Xiao flinched as if the touch itself were unbearable. Because kindness from Shulang meant hope. And hope was something Fan Xiao didn't know how to survive. Emotions crashed violently between them. Fan Xiao's anger clashed with Shulang's exhaustion. One desperate to hold on, the other desperate to breathe. Words that should have soothed only stung deeper. And then, for one terrible moment, Fan Xiao crossed a line, not with graphic violence, not with explicit force, but with emotional pressure so intense that the room itself seemed to shrink. He trapped Yu Shulang not physically, but emotionally, using closeness as a weapon, using his pain as a chain, using his fear as leverage. His touch was trembling, not with desire, but with panic. And Yu Shulang, pressed beneath the chaos of Fan Xiao's grief, could feel every unspoken fear. When Shulang finally whispered the question that shattered him, whether he could ever trust Fan Xiao again, the world paused. Fan Xiao's eyes trembled with something far too raw to hide.
He didn't swear loyalty. He didn't promise forever.
He didn't pretend to be the man Shulang needed him to be. He simply said, "Don't throw me away." And that broke them both. Because Yu Shulang wasn't heartless. His silence wasn't indifference. His distance wasn't punishment. It was fear of being humiliated again, betrayed again, destroyed again. But looking up at Fan Xiao's trembling expression, at those pained, bloodshot eyes that had lost their usual arrogance, something inside him softened. Something tired. Something fragile. He finally spoke 4 words that undid every defense Fan Xiao had built around himself. Comebacktome.com. Fan Xiao collapsed, not physically but emotionally, like a man who'd been drowning for days and finally broke through the surface. He buried his face in Shulang's neck, trembling with relief, whispering curses that were more affection than anger. He complained that Shulang was cruel for deciding when he could leave and when he could return. He accused him of being too calm, too composed, too in control. But Shulang only stared at the faded wallpaper, his heart aching with a mixture of love and fear. When he finally asked whether Fan Xiao was coming back or not, the answer came instantly. "I've missed you. I'm coming back." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a clean reconciliation. It was 2 wounded men clinging to the only thing that had ever made sense between them: each other. In episode 7, love isn't soft. It isn't gentle. It isn't safe. It's a battlefield where pride and vulnerability collide, where trust hangs by a thread, and where 2 people who should have let go instead fall even deeper. And as Fan Xiao smiles, victorious, relieved, hungry for closeness the world will never understand, you realize episode 7 isn't the climax. It's the calm before the real storm. Because coming back is just the beginning. And that's where episode 7 leaves us: 2 men reunited, but with cracks deep enough to swallow them whole. Oh? If you want the next spoiler breakdown the moment it drops, hit that subscribe button, smash like, and drop your theories in the comments.